Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to bring you my October vlog style reading wrap up. That's right, this month I actually got around to doing it vlog style instead of getting to the end of the month and not having any clips filmed. If this is the first vlog style wrap up of mine that you've seen, the way that I do this is throughout the month, as I am finishing books, I take clips of me talking about them shortly after finishing them. Before I show you those clips, I do this quick little introduction where I give you an overview on how my reading month went. So I'd say that October was pretty successful. I read 5 books, and considering I had 2 months of only reading 3 books each, I was really excited about it. So out of those 5 books, 2 of them were standalones and 3 of them were in series. One of those series books was a second book in a duology, so go Jade for finishing a duology. One of them was a series starter, and one of them was a mid-series book. As far as ratings, I had 2 3-star reads, 2 4-star reads, and 1 5-star read. The books that I read were My Plain Jane by Cyntha, Jodi Meadows, and Brodi Ashton, Our Dark Duet by VE Schwab, Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, Vicious by VE Schwab, and The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kiersten. Because there are 5 books in this video, and because when I do these vlog style, I do end up being a little chattier than I would be for a normal wrap up, this video turned out to be quite long, so go grab a coffee or tea or a snack, something to occupy yourself while you watch this. I also always include timestamps in the description box for each book, so if there are only specific books in this wrap up you're interested in, feel free to skip around using those timestamps. If you're interested in my thoughts on any of these books, then stay tuned. Hey guys, so it's only the second week of the month and I've already finished 1 book and I'm about 80% through the 2 other books that I'm reading, and so I wanted to pop in here and talk to you about my thoughts on that book before I finish the other 2 books. So the first book that I finished in October was My Plain Jane by the Lady Janies, which includes Cyntha, Jodi Meadows, and Brodi Ashton. This is the second book in the Lady Janies series, which is not really a series, they're like a series of companion novels. And the first book is called My Lady Jane. So what connects these books is that they are both about different famous Janes. The other thing about these books is they're kind of like comedy, they're meant to be really funny. My Plain Jane is about Jane Eyre, and I've heard people describe this book as like Jane Eyre with Ghostbusters, and I definitely agree, especially because Ghostbusters is like a comedy, a funny movie. I could also see this book being described as like a crossover between Jane Eyre and like Scooby-Doo, because I feel like the humor is a little cartoony. As I'm reading the book, I can see the scenes play out as a cartoon. Ghosts get bopped over the head in this book. The sort of comedy that's in this book reminds me a lot of the humor that's in The Princess Bride, like the book The Princess Bride, if you guys have ever read that. And the authors tend to break the fourth wall and talk directly to the reader, and it also kind of pokes fun at the time period that the book is set in. There's a lot of talking about how women have to wear corsets and how that's really uncomfortable and makes it hard to breathe, or how women in this time period weren't allowed to be left alone with men. So it really pokes fun at the time period and at the story of Jane Eyre, which I've never read Jane Eyre, so I can't make a direct comparison. I don't know if I had read Jane Eyre, if I would have enjoyed My Plain Jane more than I did. That's definitely a possibility, but it's also possible that if you are a major fan of Jane Eyre, you might not like My Plain Jane because you might not like that it's sort of making fun of it. So just definitely keep that in mind before going into this book. Another thing I've seen people talk about is that Charlotte Bronte is actually one of the characters in the book, and some people like that or don't like that. Funny story, like I said, I've never read Jane Eyre and I'm not a classics person. Before I read this book, if you had asked me who had written Jane Eyre, I would have told you it was Jane Austen. I had no idea that Charlotte Bronte was the author of Jane Eyre, but now I know and I will never forget. So I listened to My Lady Janies on audio only, which I got from my library. I can't decide if I recommend listening to the audiobook over reading it physically. This is narrated by Fiona Hardingham, who I've listened to previously, and I really enjoy her as a narrator, so that was one of the reasons why I felt comfortable going forward with just the audiobook and not getting like the ebook or anything. And I still think she did a really great job. But one thing that bugged me is that for a lot of the ghosts, she used like really funny voices. For example, Jane has a best friend who is a ghost, and every time she voiced this best friend ghost, I kid you not, it sounded like Moaning Myrtle. You know how Moaning Myrtle in the movies has that really high-pitched voice and it's, you know, swells a lot. And when she voiced men, it was definitely a manly voice, but it was like a funny manly voice, which the book is supposed to be funny, so I get why she did that. I just think that if I had read the book without the audiobook, those were not the voices that I would have had in my head, and it was a little bit distracting. So while I did enjoy this book, I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed My Lady Jane. There just weren't as many moments that made me laugh. There were parts of the plot that were a little slow, so I ended up settling on 3 out of 5 stars. It was a good time. It just wasn't a 4-star good time. Okay, those are my thoughts on My Plain Jane, and I will check in with you guys when I have finished another book. Bye. Hey guys, it's Jade. So I'm back because I have finished another book. I'm in my bathroom because I'm actually getting ready to go to a family dinner and I need to get ready. But I also wanted to film my thoughts on the book that I just finished. Hopefully it's not too echoey in here, but I'm going to tell you my thoughts as I straighten my hair. So the book that I finished the other night was Our Dark Duet, which is the second book in the This Savage Song duology. I actually don't know if that's what the duology is called, but the first book was The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I am pretty sure I read the first book pretty close to when it came out, so it's been a while since I read the first book. I kind of wish I had read them a little more close together. I definitely feel like emotionally I would have connected more to the characters if I had read them more close together. In fact, when I started reading Our Dark Duet, I realized how much, or how little, I remembered. So I actually went over to Recaptains. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I'll definitely link it in the description box. It's a group of people who will put up recaps of books that are in a series. And of course they don't have like every single series that exists. A lot of them are like the really popular YA books, but they have some adult books as well. And they just do really nice recaps of what's going on, like short versions, medium versions, and then like a final, this is what you really need to know about how it ends. Really helpful website. I'm sure you've heard of what the series is about. It's a dystopian that has monsters in it. I would say that the series has very much of like an urban fantasy feel. Like it's got that like dark and gritty feel to it that I associate with urban fantasy and not necessarily dystopians. But it is dystopian because it's like in a futuristic United States. But there's like 4 different monsters and they're all created by different acts of violence. I think that the world building in the series is really interesting. It's probably my favorite part. I mean, VE Schwab or Victoria Schwab is so creative, and the ideas that she came up with for these monsters in this world, I love. But unfortunately, I didn't enjoy this book as much as I thought I would or wanted to. I think I gave the first one 4 out of 5 stars, and this one I was hoping I would also at least enjoy it on the level of a 4-star, but I ended up giving it a 3-star rating. I honestly feel like the pacing was part of my issue. I took a really long time to read this book. I literally read it for like a month, which I don't finish books quickly, but I usually finish them like within 2 to 3 weeks. And it was because I was kind of struggling with it. There were many times where things would start to get exciting and then things would be kind of boring and then exciting, like the pacing was up and down. I was having a hard time staying engaged. I wasn't connecting with the characters. I know a lot of people really like the main character, Kate Harker, and I don't know why, but I didn't really connect with her. I found her to be stubborn and selfish, and she's kind of impulsive, which is not a characteristic I like to read in characters. August, on the other hand, I love August. He is such a sweet soul and definitely was one of my favorite parts of this duology. That being said, the ending still brought a few tears to my eyes. Victoria Schwab really just like doesn't hold back when it comes to endings. She's not scared to do like big things, and I really do appreciate that about her as an author. But I think those are pretty much all my thoughts on Our Dark Duet. It didn't live up to what I had hoped based on the first book. Like I don't think it was as good as the first book for me, and those are my thoughts. I am gonna finish getting ready for my family dinner, and hopefully I'm checking in with you guys in a day or 2 with the other book that I have finished. Bye. Just wanted to pop in because I had one more thought about Our Dark Duet. I mentioned a little bit that the pacing seemed weird to me, but part of it was that you spend like a good chunk of the beginning seeing Kate and August recapping what they've been up to since the end of the last book, because a little bit of time has passed. And so like you're being introduced to characters, you're getting to know people, and then everything changes. And Kate's storyline, I'm trying not to be spoilery, but like she goes and does something different and like leaves these people behind that we were just starting to get to know. And that was a little bit jarring for me, and I think added to some of my pacing issues. All of a sudden I kind of felt like the rug was pulled out from under me, I guess. So those are my final thoughts on Our Dark Duet. I definitely still recommend the series if you think the premise sounds interesting. A lot of people really love this duology. All right, I'm officially ending my thoughts on Our Dark Duet, and I will check in with you guys with the next book very soon. Bye. Hey guys, so I'm here because I finished another book, like I said I was going to. It's only the 14th, and this is the third book that I finished. I am pretty impressed with myself. Granted, one of those books I read most of in September, but still, I'm really happy with how much I've read this month. Hopefully I can keep it up. I am about to go out of town, so that could go either way. Anyways, the book that I just finished was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. One of the reasons why I read this one so quickly was because I got it out from my library and there was a wait list. There was a wait list for me to get it, but also a wait list behind me. I only had like a week left when I started reading it before I had to turn it in. And it may or may not have been a day or two late. As you guys know, I have been highly anticipating reading Spinning Silver. I read Uprooted by Naomi Novik last year and is one of my favorite books. I think I've heard that this is supposed to take place in the same world as Uprooted. I didn't see really any evidence or anything that really connected the two worlds other than the world being Russian inspired. So I'm going to try to give a synopsis for this, but it's a little hard. Spinning Silver is about 3 different women. One of them is Miriam, and her father is a moneylender, but he's not very good at his job. So at the beginning of the story, Miriam takes over for him and earns a reputation for being able to turn silver into gold because her family starts actually making money for once. In this world, there is a fairy-like race called the Staric. To be honest, the way that these Staric are described, they sound like they look a lot like White Walkers with like ice-looking skin and like really blue eyes. And then there's also 2 other women. One of them is the daughter of a man who owes Miriam's family money, but he can't pay it back. So Miriam takes her on as an employee, and she's able to work off her family's debt that way. There's also another woman who is the daughter of a duke, and she gets engaged and married to the Tsar, who is a man with some secrets. These 3 women's lives become intertwined. This is definitely a very feminist book. All 3 of these women are really strong and are doing what they have to take care of their families, which I loved. I think out of the 3 women, my favorite character was the daughter of the Duke. I just really liked her personality. She was really clever, really smart. Just like Uprooted, the story is super atmospheric. So if you like atmospheric writing, I definitely recommend it. I think this is a perfect book to read in the winter because it's winter and snowing like the whole time the story takes place. And snow and ice plays a really big part in it because the Staric King is like the king of winter, basically. I really like the take on Fae with the Starics. I wish I could get a whole nother book just set in the Staric Kingdom. I would totally read that. Like the first half of the book, you're pretty much with just those 3 women POVs that I mentioned. But then in the second half of the book, you are introduced to 3 other point of views. So one of the new POVs I thought was completely unnecessary and I wish it hadn't been in there. And then one of those POVs, I understood why it was in there, but I kind of found that person's narrative voice a little annoying and I didn't really like it. And then the other 3rd point of view that was added, I actually really liked, and I wouldn't have minded seeing more from that point of view like earlier in the story, but I also understand why it didn't start until like the halfway point. Spinning Silver was like pitched as a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, like a loose Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but I actually saw a lot of other retelling aspects as well. I saw a little bit of like Arabian Nights or 1000 Nights in there. I feel like there was another fairy tale that I was like seeing in the story, but I can't remember what it was. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not a direct Rumpelstiltskin retelling, which I think we knew before going into it. But I also saw other fairy tale influences in this book as well, which I love fairy tale retellings in general. It's always cool to see like unique takes on that stuff, so I really appreciated that. Another thing that I found really interesting is that Miriam is actually Jewish, and so there was a lot of things about Judaism in here, just, her traditions and how that was really important to Miriam, and some of the prejudices that she had experienced being a Jewish person, which I found to be really fascinating because there wasn't anything else in this world other than the king being called a czar that indicated that this took place in our world at all. As far as I know, it's a fictional place, but Judaism seems to exist in this world, which I thought was really cool. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I definitely recommend the audiobook. I thought the narrator was fantastic, which is really funny because I tried to listen to Uprooted on audio last year, and the narrator had such a heavy Russian accent that I couldn't listen to it. It was just really distracting. In this book, the narrator still has a bit of an accent, but I think it's definitely much more toned down. I mostly listened to this on audio because I really enjoyed the narration. This is definitely more of a slow building story. I would not call it fast-paced at all. Once I hit a certain point, I want to say a little bit past 50%, like maybe 60%, I could hardly put this book down and could not stop reading, which was good because I needed to turn it in soon. And overall, I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Future Jade here. I don't know what I was thinking when I was finishing this book or filming this part of my wrap-up, but now that I'm a couple weeks out and looking back on Spinning Silver, I have nothing but fond memories of reading that book. I think it was definitely like a 4.5 that at the time that I finished it, and when I was filming that clip, I decided to round down to 4, but as time has passed, I think it definitely should be rounded up to 5. So I have officially changed my rating on Goodreads and made this a 5-star book. Those are all my thoughts on Spinning Silver. I'm in the middle of 2 books right now, and I'm hoping to finish a 3rd one before the end of the month. So we'll see. This might be a 6-book month for me, which is exciting after 2 3-book months in a row. All right, I'll check in with you guys later. Bye. Hey guys, it's Jade. So I have been traveling for like the last 7 days. It's been officially a week since I left home, but I finished another book, so I'm going to tell you my thoughts about it from a hotel room. So the next book that I finished in October was Vicious by VE Schwab. This book has a lot of love out there, and it's definitely been on my TBR for like a long time, but it was not on my immediate TBR really. The reason why I picked up this book when I did is that I'm currently playing this game called the Bookish Games. My friend Aussie runs this game through a blog. Each edition is based on like a book, and it's like the game Mafia or Werewolf if you guys have ever played that before. It's kind of hard to like explain or wrap your head around unless you've played it before. I'll link the blog where we play the game down below if you guys are interested in taking a look. But my point is that this edition of the Bookish Games was inspired by Vicious. You don't need to read the book to play the game, but of course, as I was playing the game, I was really inspired to read the book, and so I did. If you haven't heard of Vicious before, it is an adult book. I'm not really sure what genre to classify it as. It's about superheroes. So what is that? Is that paranormal, or is it urban fantasy? I'm not sure. If you guys have read Vicious before, let me know down in the comment section how you would categorize it. So the 2 main characters are Victor and Eli, and the book is told in like 2 different timelines. So you have one timeline when Victor and Eli are younger and they're in college. They're going to a really prestigious school, and they're both scientists, and they discovered that if you almost die but don't die, that it gives you special powers. And in the book, people with these special powers are called EOs, which stands for extraordinaries. So both Victor and Eli become extraordinaries, which is not a spoiler, it happens at the very beginning of the book. But then the second storyline is set in the future, and Victor and Eli have become enemies. And that timeline is like a revenge story. I did kind of have really high hopes for it because it had been hyped up, and I already knew that I like V.E. Schwab's writing, and I ended up giving the book 4 stars. I liked it, but I didn't love it, and I'm having a little bit of trouble pinpointing why I didn't love it. For some reason, I didn't really connect with the characters all that well, at least not like emotionally, but I also don't think you're really supposed to connect to them emotionally. Both Eli and Victor are like not great people. I mean, there's definitely one side of the 2 that I feel like you're supposed to take when you're reading the book, but really neither of them are good people, which is actually one of the things that I loved about the book, is that there's so many shades of gray, and even the people that you're rooting for aren't necessarily like your traditional heroes. So I really like that complexity to the characters. I actually had a really interesting conversation with Leanna from Leanna's library. I had dinner with her on Sunday, and she kind of pointed out that in her experience, she doesn't usually connect with VE Schwab's characters, but that she loves VE Schwab's books more because of the world building and the plots, which is so true. I definitely loved the idea of how you become an EO in this book. The plot held my interest the whole time. I was never bored, but for some reason it just wasn't quite a 5 stars for me. Also, like I said, I've been traveling, and I don't know if maybe I just felt like disconnected, or if I couldn't fully immerse myself in the experience of reading it because I was traveling, but I did read a good amount of it, probably even more than half of it, before I started traveling. I'm probably starting to sound like this is really negative, but it's not. I did really enjoy the book. If I had done like a 5-star prediction book, like I would have predicted this to be a 5-star, so I'm a little disappointed that it's not, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think my favorite thing about the book was the complexity of the characters and how neither of the two main characters really seemed like the traditional heroes. It was almost like you're reading a book about 2 different villains or anti-heroes, which is really different from anything that I've read before. I did listen to a lot of this on audio, so maybe that was part of my issue too. I listened to a lot of this on audio, and the narrator, while he wasn't terrible, he wasn't great either, so that definitely didn't add to my experience of reading the book. Okay, I think those are all my thoughts on Vicious. I gave it 4 stars. It was a solid book. I do plan to read the second book, which I'm kind of blanking on the name of right now. I want to say it's Villainous, but I could be making that up. I should actually be finishing 2 more books before the end of the month, so this reading vlog is going to be a long one. I hope you guys grab some coffee. Alright guys, I will check in with you for the next one. Bye. Hey guys, it's Jade. So I finished another book. I finished this book on my way back from my 10-day trip, and then I spent the next couple of days being a bit of a blob and just sort of recuperating from my trip. So the last book that I finished was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kiersten White. And I read this as a physical copy. It was actually an ARC, or an advanced reader's copy, that I received when I went to the North Texas Teen Book Festival in exchange for an honest review. I was excited to read this book because I had read And I Darken by Kiersten White and really loved it. In fact, I've read And I Darken twice because I reread it in anticipation of the sequel coming out, and I somehow still haven't read the sequel. I think the whole trilogy is out by now, so I really need to get on that. So because I had previously enjoyed Kiersten White, I had some higher expectations going into this book than I would have if I, hadn't heard of the author before. And overall, I'd say that this book met my expectations, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. To give a broad synopsis, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein is a YA historical fiction horror book. It's supposed to be a retelling of the original Frankenstein, which I did read, but I read it like in high school. It was a long time ago, and I honestly don't remember much about it at all. Kiersten White actually has a really interesting author's note at the end of the book explaining why she wanted to write this book that I found to be fascinating, and I kind of wish that I had read that before reading The Dark Descent. I often think that about author's notes. They always put them at the end, but a lot of times I feel like I would have appreciated some aspect of the book more if I had read the author's note before. Anyways, it's a retelling of Frankenstein, but it's told from the perspective of Elizabeth Frankenstein, who is a young girl who through most of the book is about 16, 17, but we also get a bunch of flashbacks to when she was younger. So when she was younger, she was basically adopted by the Frankenstein family because their son, Victor Frankenstein, was having a hard time making friends, or he had some violent tendencies, and they were hoping that by adopting Elizabeth as a companion for him, she would be able to help control his outbursts and violent tendencies. Before coming into this family, Elizabeth was being raised by an abusive and cruel woman because both of her parents had died when she was younger. So when the story starts out, present day Elizabeth goes out looking for Victor because he has been away studying for a while, and she's worried that because of his time away from her, he's fallen into some of his bad habits. Like I said, there are a lot of flashbacks in this book, which I think could be a little off-putting for some people, but I think these flashbacks are really important in getting to know Elizabeth. And because of that, I think that this book is very character-focused, which is true for the other Kiersten White book I've read as well, Anti-Darken. I just think Kiersten White does such a good job with characters and making them really complicated and not, black and white. And that's no different when it comes to Elizabeth Frankenstein. We get to know Elizabeth from a young age through these flashbacks and really understand her motivations, which honestly are just to survive. I mean, the Frankensteins took her from an abusive household, and without the support of the Frankensteins, she would be out on the streets. So she does whatever it takes to make sure the Frankensteins and Victor particularly knows that they need her. And all of her actions that she takes throughout the book are based on this need to be needed by the Frankensteins. I think this book was pretty dark and definitely has like a gothic feel that fits really well with a Frankenstein retelling. Another thing I love about Kiersten White is that I feel like she gives her female characters so much agency, even in this historical fiction time period where women don't really have a lot of rights, which Kiersten White definitely highlights through some of the situations she puts Elizabeth through. I think Kiersten White did a really good job of showing us what it was like to be a woman during this time period and how many rights you don't have and how you're just always at the mercy of men in that world. That is definitely juxtaposed to the situations where Elizabeth is making choices, and it's really hard to say if those choices are necessarily good or bad because they all come from a place of needing to survive. I hope that kind of conveys how complex of a character Elizabeth Frankenstein is, and that's really why I enjoyed this book so much. I can't really put my finger on exactly why it wasn't a 5-star book because I did really enjoy it, but for some reason it wasn't on the level of a 5-star enjoyment for me. I've also had like a string of 3 and 4-star books throughout October, and I'm having a really hard time figuring out if it's like me not enjoying books as much as I usually do, or if it's just the books that I'm reading aren't books that I would give 5 stars. As you know, I was traveling for like 10 days, so some of it could be that, but in a way, it kind of makes me feel better that I haven't had any 5-star reads this month, just because when I give out too many 5-star reads, then I start to question myself as far as am I being too easy on books? I don't know. I think that being a public reviewer of books, this is a conversation with myself that I have a lot, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think other people struggle with this too. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this book that I want to mention. I've seen some reviews on Goodreads saying that this book was boring, and I guess I can't really say that it was super action-filled. I can kind of see where people are coming from. I think Kiersten White tends to write just really complex characters, and that's why I love her books, and that's why I loved this book. Okay, I think those are all of my thoughts. It's pretty close to the end of the month, and I actually don't think I'm going to finish another book before the month is over. Typically, I would have a Watt-along or Wheel of Time book in here. Our live show is on Saturday the 3rd, and I'm currently only about 25% through the book, so I don't think I'm actually going to finish it in October. I think I'll finish it early November, so I'm just going to put that book in my next month's wrap-up. So if you guys have read any of the books that I talked about in this month's wrap-up, then leave your thoughts about them down in the comment section. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like bookish content. I post 1 to 2 times a week. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.